let's talk about something that's, well, it's pretty shocking. Did one of the most well-known figures in early Islam, Aisha, actually celebrate the murder of the Prophet's own successor, Imam Ali alayhi salam? It's a heavy question, I know, but it's a question that historical reports force us to ask. So in this explainer, we're going to walk through the evidence, piece by piece, using respected Islamic sources to see what really happened. So let's dive right in. The whole story, the whole controversy, really kicks off with one single reported action, an action that raises some very, very profound questions. This report right here, it comes from a very well-known historical work called Maqatil al-Talibiyyin. And what's really important for you to know is that its author, Abu al-Faraj al-Asfahani, is a scholar who is respected within the Sunni tradition. So this isn't coming from some obscure text, it's a crucial piece of the puzzle. And what does it say? It says, when the news of the martyrdom of Ali alayhi salam reached Aisha, she performed prostration, sujud. Now, a prostration, a sujud, that is almost always an act of thankfulness to God. So the report is basically claiming she was thankful for his death. I mean, that's an incredible claim. But hold on. A claim this serious, you can't just take it at face value. You have to ask, is this account even reliable? Is it legit? In Islamic scholarship, the first thing you do is check the chain of narrators, what's called the Isnad. And we're going to do that using the very sources accepted by Ahl-Sunnah. So, here it is. This is the chain of people who pass this story down through history. Each name is a link in that chain. For this report to be considered authentic, every single one of these individuals has to be considered trustworthy by the standards of Sunni scholarship. So the big question is, are they? Let's just start at the top. The famous Sunni scholar al-Dhahabi has this to say about the first narrator, Muhammad ibn al-Husayn. He calls him an imam, 𝗬𝗀, mufassir, and, most importantly, thiqa, which means trustworthy. And a 𝗬𝗀, that's not just some casual title. That's someone who has memorized 300,000 hadiths with their chains. We're talking about the highest level of scholarly praise. And it doesn't stop there. The very next link in the chain, Ahmad ibn Hazm, gets similar praise. Al-Dhahabi calls him an imam, 𝗵𝗲, a saduq. Be very truthful. A ḥāfiz is someone who has memorized 100,000 hadiths. Another top scholar, Ibn Hibban, confirms he was both precise and trustworthy. Okay, and this right here is the kicker. The third narrator, Uthman ibn Abi Shayba, was actually a teacher to al-Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, and Ibn Majah, the compilers of the most authoritative hadith books in Sunni Islam. The rest of the chain is just as solid, authenticated by top Sunni scholars. So according to their own standards, the credibility of this report is, well, it's rock solid. So the report is sound. We have to accept that. And that brings us to the big why. Why would Aisha react this way? Was this just a strange one-off thing? Or was it part of a much deeper, longer story of animosity towards Imam Ali alayhi salam? Well, when you start digging into the sources, you find that this wasn't some isolated incident. There seems to have been a pattern of deep-seated animosity going all the way back to the final days of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ himself. And a perfect example of this is found right in Sahih al-Bukhari. Okay, check this out. We have two perspectives on the exact same event. In Aisha's account, she's describing the very sick Prophet ﷺ being helped by two men. She names one of them, al-Abbas, but the other, she just calls him another man. But later, when the narrator asks Ibn Abbas about it, he immediately sets the record straight. He says, do you know who the man was that Aisha did not name? He was Ali ibn Abi Talib. So why would she leave out his name? I mean, why be so vague? You don't even have to guess. The most famous Sunni commentator on Sahih al-Bukhari, Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, he just spells it out for us in his book, Fath al-Bari. He says, flat out, Aisha could not bring herself to speak of him, Ali, in a good way. Her feelings were apparently so strong, she couldn't even say his name in a positive story. So we have this personal issue, right? But it didn't stay personal for long. Oh no, it blew up onto the public stage and escalated into one of the most tragic and pivotal conflicts in all of early Islamic history. This all came to a head at the Battle of the Camel in the year 36 after Hijrah. Aisha, along with 𝗪𝗪 and Zubair, literally led an army against the legitimate ruling caliph of the time, Imam Ali alayhi salam. In Islamic law, there's a specific term for this, bagha. It means an armed rebellion against a just and legitimate ruler, and it is considered a major, major sin. So what does Islam actually say about doing something like that? I mean, what's the ruling on rebellion? Well, we don't need to look very far. The most authoritative books, Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, are incredibly clear on this. The Prophet Muhammad 𝗧𝗵𝗲 himself is reported to have said this. Whoever separates from the community, even by a handspan, and dies, he dies a death of jahiliyyah. Just think about what that means. A death of jahiliyyah. A death in a state of pre-Islamic ignorance. That is a huge, huge warning against dividing the community and rebelling. And the warnings are stark. We're talking about consequences that aren't just political, they're deeply spiritual. A death in a state of ignorance, the possibility that your prayers and your fasting won't even be accepted, and ultimately becoming fuel for the hellfire. It is incredibly severe. Okay, so we've looked at the prostration, the history of bad blood, and the act of open rebellion. Now let's turn to the highest authority of all, the Qur'an itself. Does the Qur'an say anything that could be a parallel or maybe a warning for a situation involving the wife of a prophet? And it does. In Surah At-Tahrim, verse 10, Allah gives this incredibly powerful and sobering example. He talks about the wife of Prophet Nuh and the wife of Prophet Lut. They were married to two of the most righteous servants of God, but they betrayed them. And the result? It was said to them, "Enter the fire with those who enter." The message is crystal clear. Just being married to a prophet is no guarantee of salvation. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's about the wives of Nuh alayhi salam and Lut alayhi salam. What's that got to do with this situation? Was this verse just a general history lesson, or was it revealed as a direct warning to someone specific at the time? Well, the answer is right there, plain as day, in Sahih al-Bukhari. When Umar ibn al-Khattab was asked about the two wives mentioned right before this verse, the ones who had conspired against the Prophet ﷺ, he replied without any ambiguity. He gives two names. They were Aisha and Hafsa. And this wasn't just Umar's opinion. This became the consensus view among the great classical Sunni commentators. The famous scholar al-Qurtubi, in his tafsir, says it explicitly. This is a parable that Allah struck to warn Aisha and Hafsa. He says God is warning them about opposing the Prophet of Allah 𝗧𝗵𝗲. The warning in the Quran, it was direct and it was personal. So let's just connect all the dots here. We started with a shocking report of a prostration of thanks, a report authenticated by Sunni scholars themselves. Then we saw a long history of deep-seated animosity. That animosity then exploded into armed rebellion, an act that the Prophet ﷺ warned against in the strongest possible terms. And to top it all off, we find a direct warning in the Quran itself, which companions and classical scholars say was aimed directly at Aisha. So it all leads us to this final, really profound question that I want to leave you with. When a person offers a prostration in joy for the murder of the Prophet's rightful appointed successor, what does that truly reveal about the state of their faith?